Good morning, everyone, and hopefully everyone can hear me, see me. First time being live, so fingers crossed this is all going well. Welcome. Welcome to a new series. My name is Mike Evans. I work for SAP, have done for almost 7 years now, as a pre-sales solution consultant. So part of my job is to advise people on how our solutions can meet and address business challenges and issues that customers have and help them deliver value on those. So making sure they have the right solutions to the right problems. I was thinking over the Christmas break, how can we speak to more people? How can we get kind of more messaging out? And how can our existing customers as well find out more about either the solutions they have or potentially some of the solutions that they haven't got? And so what I want to do is every 2 weeks have these short sessions for 15 minutes where we can discuss particular topics, challenges that we see most commonly, and have those reflected in these particular sessions for 15 minutes. Now, talking for only 15 minutes may be the hardest part of this for me because I like to talk a lot, but hopefully there'll be enough to keep you interested and also give you some information. So today we will have a presentation on end-to-end systems to lock in the value at each phase and pass it on. But if you have any recommendations, any suggestions to future sessions, pop them in the comments. I will be reviewing them after the session, trying not to get too distracted with them during the session, but pop them into the comments and then I can get back to all the comments and also look at the suggestions afterwards. So as I said, today will be about how the end-to-end solution can kind of lock in that value and make sure that we keep any value and savings that we negotiate and achieve through the different cycles of end-to-end procurement. And I should have said up front, this is what it's all about. Kind of the procurement side of things is where I specialise, working for SAP. And I was trying to come up with a good analogy of how an end-to-end solution compares to point solutions. And I played a game last night with our 12-year-old where you fold up a piece of paper and you draw a head, a body, legs and feet, and anything can come up, right? We could draw anything that we can imagine, and sometimes this is the equivalent to spot solutions. We solve individual problems at a time, and we don't look at maybe the bigger picture. And so this was our end solution yesterday. This is what we came up with. And you can imagine if you look at, for example, a sourcing problem only, and you don't consider the contract management side of things, you don't consider the buying side of things, this is where you can get that disconnect into the holistic picture. So it doesn't turn out to be exactly what you expected. I'm not even sure what this is. I've decided to name him Friday in honor of these sessions, but not exactly sure what it is. And sometimes it's not the best outcome for our organizations because that holistic picture isn't taken into consideration. There isn't that target vision in mind. And so when it comes to having these point solutions, which may be great on their own, I mean, we can see the head that Amy drew last night. It's brilliant on its own, but it doesn't connect to the robot body that I drew. So when we have these point solutions, marrying them up and making them talk to each other and connect, it can be quite time consuming, and a lot of the time we don't always get what we expect out the back of it. Now, in maybe a procurement landscape, how does this impact and how does it show itself to even when we're intending to have the same outcome? A lot of the times, and for a lot of customers, and I know I've experienced this in my past in kind of consultancy and working for procurement organisations, that we can start with the best plans in the world, and even if we have the total procure to pace kind of process in mind, if that process doesn't talk to the one before it and the one after it, then we can end up with something like this, where we have the best will in the world and the best intentions, but kind of savings leakage and value leakage creeps into this process, and it doesn't always get passed on from one phase to the other. And this shows itself in a lot of organisations with maybe a lot of pain within accounts payable. So when the invoice comes in, was it created from a purchase order that has been approved and has the right information in? Was that purchase order created from the contracts which sourcing have negotiated? Was that sourcing event negotiated with the right suppliers, and so on and so forth? It really has a knock-on effect, and the more disconnected these systems are, either the harder it is to lock it in, or the more expensive it can become for IT solutions to make them talk to each other if it's not designed to do that in the first place. So what we want to do is kind of get away from this, and we don't want to push all of our pain downstream or make it occur in certain places. We want to lock it in and have this vision of this kind of stallion that we see in front of us, where everything is locked in. We're passing on the value from one phase to the other, and we're making it talk to each other and connect in the right ways. And if I move this into maybe a solution, maybe a more realistic example now, and we look at how our approach shows itself, and I'll move myself up here to our employee. If I have a need, I need to go and shop for that request. So what I'm going to do is go into, in this case, guided buying for indirect, create my requisition, have that approved, and again passing that same information on for the approval, turning that requisition into a purchase order upon the completion of the approval. So again, no manual intervention, having that automatically turn into a purchase order, and having that purchase order shared across the network to suppliers. That allows us to track statuses, again on the same piece of information, the same document, whether the supplier confirms it, when they are ready to ship the item, send advance shipping notices, etc. But we are kept up to date with all of the statuses, and again in the same place, so we're not passing this from a different system. It would also be the same place we create our goods receipt. So our goods receipt will be that we've received our items, they sent the advance shipping notice, we can then say, yep, we've got all of them, some of them. And importantly, because it's gone out across the network, when the supplier starts to submit invoices against that, and this is where we start talking to our accounts payable team here, we can again turn all of that information that was on the purchase order into an invoice and check the information on that before they send it back in, which can prevent suppliers from changing prices, from changing quantities, from putting in duplicate invoice numbers. We do all of that check up front before it hits our accounts payable system. But because we do that check, and because we're again talking to the same bits of information, we can make sure that that invoice is more likely to match first time. Which means that then it can be fully reconciled and sent for payment. Yeah, win-win, right? Win for the supplier, they're going to get paid on time because everything in their invoice was correct and valid and there. And also for us as a buying organisation, it's good for us because we know that our invoice is going to match our purchase order because of that pre-validation. But it doesn't stop and start with a procure to pay process. We also have the sourcing side of things. So when I came in to do my request, where did I get that content from, and how was the pricing brought to me? Well, we have a contract sitting in place which decides all of the things like payment terms, like volume discounts, what price I should pay, shouldn't pay, who the supplier is. All of that ends up in a contract. And that's what we reference when we shop, either as kind of individuals in something like guided buying, or if we are to be looking at direct materials, we also need to reference a contract there, more typically in an ERP system in that case. But again, those contracts don't just appear by magic. We want to connect those to qualified suppliers, which have been through an RFP, RFQ process to gather that pricing. Again, ideally we want to risk assess those suppliers before and obviously during and after the RFP events to make sure that we don't have a risk to our organisation in terms of our supply base. We want to make sure that all the people we do business with are reputable and control that risk that we may be exposed to. Those risk and sourcing events and qualification criteria can take place and sit within a larger kind of sourcing project, so a strategic sourcing project, if you will, where we go through and we do all this analysis of suppliers, we do the gathering of tender events, we do the qualification, and also part of that will be the analysis of the spend, because this is very linear. What we've seen before is kind of linear in terms of a process, but in reality it's not. Once we pay on the far right hand side here, we're actually going to want to start analysing where are we spending our money, how can we spend it better, where are opportunities for future improvement. And to do that we need a good view on the data, and we need to analyse it so that we can come up with our decisions of where, as a procurement organisation, do we spend our time. So this is the process. I'll move myself back down here. This is the process. This is what I'm going to go through in the demonstration today, and show you how this kind of shows itself within a system. So let's just pull up the system here, and I'll show you that I'm in, at the minute, guided buying. So this is where I would go to do that requisitioning that we spoke around. So in my example here, I want to see a search for a webcam, so I can have my picture on every screen that you see. And what I can do here is add this particular item to my shopping cart. So this gives us very much the shopping experience we see at home, right? I'm searching for an item, I'm finding the item I like the look of, I can compare them, go into the detail if I want, but for the sake of time, I can just go in kind of check out. So this is where we can start looking at how contracting affects this shopping experience that I've got. So at the minute, I've got a particular price. If I change the quantity, automatically and without having to think as a requisitioner, this price gets updated. And this is because there's a contract sitting behind it, which means that I get a volume discount the more I order. So as an end user and a requisitioner, I don't have to think about this. It's automatically going to be applied, and I can send this on its way through an approval flow. Now, I have done this previously, and we can see here that I've actually got an invoice that's come in and is being paid. And what I want to do is step through what I call a reverse demo, kind of moving out of a persona, but just to show you where all this comes from, how it's linked together, and how we've locked in that particular those particular savings. So here is my invoice that's been sent in by a supplier. I have seen that it's automatically been reconciled. Now, why has it automatically been reconciled? Well, we saw before that I would have created a requisition which would have got turned into a purchase order. That is linked here under the references. I've also done my goods receipt, and again I've fully received it, so we can see that that is also captured here under references, which means that when this invoice comes in, it gets pre-validated, so the price hasn't changed, the quantity hasn't changed, which means that it can be automatically reconciled. I've got the order, I've got the receipt, I've got the invoice, they all match. There's nothing for accounts payable to do in this instance. But I also spoke around how we got the price in the first place. So we have a contract here, which we see, which defines the pricing terms, the approval flows, who needs to be involved if I buy particular items. All of that stuff is our pricing terms. But also, if I step back into this, I can see where this contract came from. And it's not just about holding a pricing document that then we can buy from, but this kind of contract document supports the whole process. We can see here contract preparation, negotiation with supplier, signature and post-signature activities are all captured in this contract workspace, along with tasks and teams and spend. And stepping back through here, I can see that this came from a tender event. I can go back and see which tender event it came from, and all of the pricing from this particular tender was pulled automatically through into the contract, which again ended up in the buying solution. So we can see how this really locks in the way we were talking about the value from one phase to another. So I've been out to market, I've gathered different pricing from different suppliers, and I've been able to make an award decision to create a contract. And we even spoke around how the suppliers can be qualified and risk assessed. So I can see all of the information here into registration statuses, qualification statuses, and I can even dip into the organisation itself to see exactly what's going on with this particular supplier in terms of the qualifications they have. Are they preferred in any categories or industries? Do they have certificates which are expired? In this case, yes, a lot. Or are they all up to date? Is everything working well? I get this information through the sourcing, through the contract, and also it's the same supplier that actually we end up buying from. So finally, we talked about spend analysis and analysing the spends that we see. This is the first step, but the final thing that I'll show you within the system that we can see from this end-to-end process of, okay, why did we decide to tender home office equipment? Were we spending enough money there? How many suppliers do we have in this category? This all comes from the spend information that we see in front of us, and that's where procurement people can make their decisions of, okay, we've only got a limited number of resources. Where do we want to spend our time? How are we going to deliver on our targets? And how can we achieve those savings? But once we do, we negotiate it, get savings there, lock it in with contracts, get those contracts in place, and actually start buying from them to deliver the real value to procurement, locking it in and making sure that it stays there. Now, I told you 15 minutes was a challenge. I think I'm running a little bit over of that, but I just want to finish with letting you know how you can get in touch and follow up if you wish to. So you can, if you are interested in finding out more about the solutions that SAP offers or Ariba offers, you can scan this QR code, you can go to the ariba.com, contact us, fill in a form, and someone will get in contact with you to make sure that you find the right people. It's not always going to be me, but again, if you do want to reach out to me personally, you can get me on my LinkedIn profile. Again, scan this QR code and it will take you to it, and again, message me. Happy to have any discussions. We can talk about any of the topics that have come up. Open to recommendations and suggestions on future sessions, and also, like I said, you can put those in the comments below, which I will review and get back to everyone as much as I can on. But thank you everyone for taking the time. Hopefully this was useful to some people, and yeah, this will be happening every fortnight, so we'll take a different topic and I'll go through them. So thanks everyone for joining, and hope this was useful to you. Thanks a lot.